Well, hi, my name is Trevor. I'm also very afraid of public speaking, so if I faint, just leave me there, turn on the lights or something. And my position is how banning guns will harm America. So we get the right to bear arms in the Second Amendment, which is in the Constitution, which is also the Bill of Rights. And we got that to prevent tyranny from those times when it was people were afraid of the government, with the Federalists and the Federalists. And it also went and promoted self-defense. And so, why would you want to take away these rights from the people when it's given to us from the Constitution? A lot of people go and say it's a progressive era and we're trying to give more rights to people like LGBT and all those other things. But it's also kind of contradicting when, like, Barack Obama wanted to go and add more gun control to it. So, something to think about. People are thinking, like, also going back to like the Second Amendment with people trying to, or the government, going to try to ban guns, and this is also like the most powerful our government has ever gotten. So if the government were to try to take them, and other things such as like how the Nazis were, and they can really fight back with like Jews. Sorry to bring that up, it's touchy. But let's see, the hypotheticals that I have brought are, well, I'm a gun owner, I own 3 guns, and well, I've never shot anybody or ever had to, and I'm not really planning on it unless I do become a police officer like I'd like to, and that's a possibility. But also, I'm also saying also a lot. There are 270 million out of estimated 324 million people who own firearms, and yet we still have 324 million people. So we're not all killing each other. And registration and background checks are mandatory. And also, how would it be like if none of us had guns and, well, I mean, hopefully we don't at the moment, but if someone were to bust in here and start shooting up the classroom, we'd probably be dead. But if at least one of us had a gun, we had maybe had a chance. And so, well, with my guns, they are, I have a shotgun and a AR-15. Does anybody know what AR-15s are? Do you know what AR stands for?
Automatic rifle.
It does not.
Assault rifle.
Nope.
Oh.
It means Armalite rifle. They made it. Yeah, a lot of people think it's assault rifle, which sounds more scarier. And so, yeah. And they are, or my AR-15 is in 80% arms, which is a way to get through it without having it registered is, so the lower receiver is the only thing that needs to be registered, and this is kind of like a loophole, which is also not necessarily good, but I purchased an 80% lower receiver, and so all you have to do is just drill the holes into it and bore out where the magazine goes into, and so basically it's a ghost gun. It doesn't exist. And so the law, it only applies to if you were to do that yourself, which I did, and then I bought the rest. So that's a ghost gun. Crime in the US. So if we were to ban guns, criminals don't usually listen to laws. I don't know if they kind of get that, but Chicago has a strict gun law, and it's can't have guns. And so they basically have like one of the highest crime rates with murder, and police are taking guns off the street from Chicago very, very often, even though it's illegal. I don't know that works. And guns also, they can cause crimes and they can also prevent crimes. So it's kind of hard to rape somebody if you have a gun in your face. Something to think about. They have also prevented murders. Like, police have guns, and I don't know how many people they've saved from being killed or raped or mugged or anything. Let's see. And why wouldn't you want to ban guns? Banning guns would make us very, very susceptible to any kind of crime. And if we were to be invaded by, like, I don't know, ISIS or aliens, that's possible, we wouldn't be able to defend ourselves without having a military. Plus, if you were to take away all of our guns and you were to have a cop who has a gun and he's just going to be an ass, he can kill you. So we actually have a way to fight back. And people use them for recreation. Like my guns, I don't go out and shoot people. I go out shooting and target practicing, and it's just fun.
Do you want to turn?
No, I've got it, thank you. If I forget, I will ask, but usually I keep track of the time also.
So that's like the first thing
It's okay. That tells me how long I speak then, because I'm about to talk.
it's only allowed if you do it yourself. So technically, then so it's just not registered. It doesn't have a serial number on it then?
Yeah. They will be, and we're going to be talking about it. I don't expect you to be ready tomorrow. We've got 2 weeks worth of material to cover, getting you ready for it. Nothing is due for you 48 hours from now. That's a different assignment. Yeah. All right. All right, since we're doing this for the first time, everybody's going to get a chance to see how this works as we go along. I offer my comments here, and sometimes I am a little verbose, but we'll try and keep it down to less time than the speech actually was. All right, Trevor, the strongest part of your argument is the proposition. You've got a clear statement of what the proposition is. What you need to do is give us a little bit more context. Now, you had one place where you referred to potential restrictions on guns that had been proposed by President Obama. I think you need a little bit more information there to suggest what those restrictions were and why they would be harmful. Because I don't know that any of them would have fit into the category of banning guns. And your argument is about banning guns. It's not about background checks or registration. You've already said that we have those kinds of things. So the harms that have to occur because we're banning guns, because that's what your proposition is talking about. So who's proposing banning guns? How likely is it that there would be a restriction on particular kinds of guns? It wouldn't be that hard, for instance, to point to California, where we have certain restrictions that are attempting to really accomplish the idea of banning guns as best they can by getting around whatever the rules are. So, for example, there are a whole bunch of requirements about cartridges and how they're supposed to be prepared, about the guns and what kinds of things they're allowed to be able to do, about the magazines that are being contained. And I mean, we passed a whole bunch of restrictions last year. The governor signed some restrictions. The state passed a proposition that dealt with those issues. And you can talk about how those things might have the eventual impact of restricting access to guns, which we would need to have, because here are whole classes of guns that are technically not going to be able to be sold in California or owned in California anymore. And some of them might fit into some of the things that you have. I don't remember exactly what all the restrictions are. Yeah. So, yeah, well, we'll talk about the anxiety issue in just a second. Not a problem. Look, first of all, it's just us, as I like to point out, and we're the same people that we were when you came in last week. And you had, yeah, it's a little bit different. Like I said, we'll get to that in just a second. Now, you need a clearer structure. It feels like you're wandering around on the topic. You've got ideas that you want to talk about, but they haven't been structured very clearly. I think you've got an argument that suggests that we need to have access to guns in order to protect ourselves from the government. We need to have access to guns to be able to defend ourselves against criminals, and we have a right to have guns for whatever general purpose that we have. That's fine. The argument that there's a reason that we need to protect ourselves from the government, I think you need to demonstrate that there is reason to believe that this would be problematic. Now, the analogy that you draw to the Nazis is kind of a starting point, but it's not necessarily one that is particularly convincing. The rules, regulations, procedures, what's going on in the world seems to be substantially different. And I think that you need to show, for example, that some of the policies that are being put into place, maybe they could pave the way for something like this. Maybe there's a way that ultimately the kinds of background checks could result in people being denied access to guns who should have the legal access to guns. You need to build that argument that says that there's a restriction that's potentially coming. Also, the idea that we have to protect ourselves from the government. I think that it's understandable. When we had the American Revolution, different times, different circumstances, I'm not exactly sure how the government would impose those kinds of regulations and rules on us now with the number of people we have and the way we're distributed, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a reason to have that kind of thing. And I think that you need to build that argument up a little bit. You just kind of mentioned it in passing, and it doesn't really become important. Now, the crime issue is a little bit more important because that's one of the main reasons that people have guns is for personal protection. But some of the things that you present are completely confusing. It makes it sound like, well, we don't really have to worry about rapists having guns because it's hard to rape somebody when you have a gun in your hand. That makes no sense at all. The idea that, that guns prevent crime, I think that's not a bad idea, and there's a lot of argument that suggests that this is possible. There are studies that talk about concealed carry laws. There are examples of people who've used guns in self-defense in their own homes. There might be testimony available from criminals who talk about how hesitant they are to engage in certain kinds of behavior if they think homeowners are armed or something like that. So I think that there's a good argument to be made here that says that guns can be an effective self-defense process, but there isn't any evidence in your argument. All you've got are hypotheticals, and some of the hypotheticals are a little bit confusing. For example, one of them has to be, you talk about how police use guns to protect us. So, okay, there's a reason that we believe guns can be used for self-defense. But of course, if you want to be able to shoot a cop who's being an asshole to you, I'm going, whoa. That seems like it's not a good idea for your argument in this particular position. It's an inconsistency in your position, and it undermines your credibility. So you've got to get a better structure for your arguments, and you've got a lot of hypotheticals that you're talking about. You spend some time talking about the AR-15, and you make the argument about what AR stands for, and then you get into the discussion about ghost guns, and I don't think half of the audience, I'm not sure, 90% of the audience understands what that means. The 80% figure that you use, I don't know what it is you're talking about here. You've got a context that I think is not very clear. That there are rules about how these guns are supposed to be utilized, and that people either follow the rules or don't follow the rules, that's part of your argument, I think, but I'm not sure where you're going with that. And I don't think it necessarily helps the proposition that you're taking that banning guns would be harmful. If you could show that banning the AR-15 would have a harmful impact on people, then I think you've got a clear argument. And there's a lot of stuff about these weapons because they are base guns that you can change the
Lower.
Yeah. Well, like you described a whole bunch of things. They're interchangeable parts. It can actually have different. It's like a body, and you could add a different barrel and different kinds of mechanisms to it to shoot them differently, to operate different kinds of cartridges and all that sort of thing. It's a complex issue, and the idea that it's all one thing and it's something that people don't need to be afraid of. That's, I think, what you really want to be talking about. You're just kind of all over the place on the subject, and you need a lot more control. And probably, the outline thing would have helped a little bit. I think it probably would have helped a lot. That's just neither here nor there. You don't have any citations in your information. You talk about Chicago, for instance. Where did you get this data about the crime that they have and the gun laws that they have? There ought to be but
Yeah.
Not everybody's reading your outline. You're making the presentation, so you have to tell us these things. When we did the crash course last week on public speaking, I said you need to give your citations when you're presenting your evidence. You need to give the citation prior to the oral citation of the evidence. We went through an example here, and I just want to make sure everybody knows that you need to have the oral citations in the presentation. So it's not just you that's learning here, by the way, it's everybody else. So when I do this, I'm trying not to pound on people. Trying to help everybody do a better job. All right, and you went first, so now we can talk about the anxiety thing. I think it's perfectly okay to acknowledge the anxiety at the beginning. It probably reduces your nervousness a little bit. Everybody kind of smiles and reacts, and it's suddenly a little bit calmer. So that's not a bad thing to do.
Maybe fail sophomore English.
Well, it can happen, those kinds of things. Did anybody watch the Academy Awards the other night? All right, look, anybody can make a mistake. And, Warren Beatty's professional actor who's been doing this for not 70 years, but a long time, 80, 50 years, whatever it happens to be. And there he is, and he's confused about what the award is, and it gets said, and it's an awkward moment. Anybody can make a mistake. Anybody can have a problem. You're not going to die. Nothing bad is going to happen to you. Maybe you won't be effective. Maybe people won't believe you. Maybe you'll lose a point or two on your score. Don't panic about these things, folks. Just do the best you can, and you'll be okay. All right, that's as much a reassurance as I'm going to give anybody right now.